Changing the rear brake pads and rotors on the 2018 Honda Accord begins by placing a wheel chock at both front tires. From the driver's seat, make sure that the electronic parking brake is in the off position. Release the 5 locked lug nuts with a 19mm socket and breaker bar. Locate the rear jack lift point at the rear of the fuel tank and lift the rear of the vehicle. Place the jack stands at the rearmost side jack point located in front of the rear tire and under the rear passenger door. Lower the vehicle slowly onto the jack stands. My lift jack is left in place at the rear of the vehicle for additional safety. Finish the removal of the 5 19mm lug nuts and remove the rear tire from the vehicle. Pull the brake caliper spring clip straight out in the area where my pliers are present and pry downward where the flathead screwdriver is to remove the spring clip. Moving to the inside of the brake assembly, locate and remove the brake caliper pin dust covers. To remove the 2 brake caliper guide pins located here and here, use a 7mm hex bit driver socket. When looking to the rear of the brake assembly, these will be loosened by moving the socket in a counterclockwise direction. Push the pins completely out. We will need to inspect and clean these prior to reusing. There are 2 documented methods to properly retract the parking brake into maintenance mode, allowing the caliper piston to be depressed without risking damage. One method is to use a scan tool, which can retail for at least $1,500, or to manually enter maintenance mode using a $10 socket, which I will be showing here. I've seen posts online suggesting to place the vehicle into accessory mode, but I don't feel confident in this method. Pick your poison. Getting the electronic parking brake ready for maintenance mode manually starts by removing the electric sensor cable here. You should be able to push on this piece here and the tab release on the clip inside, but that never works for me. If you look closely here, you can see the tab that is holding this connection in place. If you can get a thin flathead into the right of this tab, you can gently release the tab inside. Here is what releasing the tab with a flathead looks like. Remove the connection, making sure to pull on the plastic housing. Loosen and remove the 2 number 5 Allen keyed bolts mating the electronic parking brake actuator to the brake assembly. Rock the electronic parking brake with a pushing motion to remove it from the brake assembly. Using an E-Torx number 11 socket, turn the socket counterclockwise until it stops. Use your hand to loosen this. There is no need to be forceful. I was able to use a number 12 E-Torx here. I couldn't find my number 11. You may need to slightly turn the actuator back to remount the parking brake to the assembly. To avoid contamination of this closed system, I strongly recommend lining up the splines to the actuator and reinstall following a complete winding of this mechanism. After applying some thread locker to the number 5 Allen bolts, reinsert them into the actuator and brake assembly. Do not over-tighten. This is plastic and will break. There are no torque specifications given for these, so make these hand tight and the thread locker will handle the rest. With the electronic brake now in maintenance mode, we can depress the brake caliper piston like any other disc brake replacement. Carefully insert a flathead screwdriver between the outside brake pad and the rotor and slowly pry to separate the two, which will allow us to remove the caliper assembly from the mounting bracket. Gently tap the outside brake pad to release it from the caliper. Be careful with the brake hose, making sure not to twist or stress. Using a standard compression tool, we can now safely depress the caliper piston to the fully seated position. Place the brake assembly on top of the upper control arm and strap it into place to avoid damage. Remove the back brake pad from the caliper mounting bracket. With a breaker bar, remove the 2 17mm bolts holding the caliper mounting bracket in place. Using penetrating oil, spray the rotor mounting screw, the bolts on the hub, and around the center hub. To remove the rotor mounting screw, avoiding damage to the screw, you will need a special JIS Japanese Industrial Standard PH3 hammering screwdriver, which I will link below. Using a sledgehammer, repeatedly strike the hammering screwdriver with malice until it releases. If you damage it, this part is not required, serving no structural purpose, and could be drilled out in situations of severe rust. Remove the rotor from the hub assembly. Clean the hub assembly with brake cleaner and a wire brush. Make sure the face of the hub is flat and all high points have been chiseled off. Once clean, apply anti-seize to the face and lip of the hub assembly. Be sure to avoid applying anti-seize to the lug nut bolt threads. With a file, flathead screwdriver, wire brush, and brake cleaner, fully clean and remove all rust from the caliper mounting bracket. With a wire brush and brake cleaner, clean the caliper guide pins until they look like this. With brake cleaner, clean up the caliper guide pin dust covers. With a file, a wire brush, and brake cleaner, clean the face of the caliper piston and the rest of the caliper bracket. Be careful not to damage or puncture the rubber boot surrounding the brake caliper piston. With brake cleaner and a paper towel, clean out the boots that house the caliper guide pins. Use a silicone-based brake part lubricant that is safe for rubber on the boots that house the caliper guide pins. Wipe off excess lubricant. For areas with metal-on-metal contact, use a synthetic brake caliper lubricant and apply a small amount where the outside pads will touch, the face of the caliper piston which makes contact with the inner brake pad, and the outside face of the caliper bracket. More lubricant is not better. Use this stuff sparingly. Apply lubricant on the caliper mounting bracket in the 4 ledges that hold the brake pads. Clean the brake rotors with brake cleaner. There is often a protective coating on them which needs to be removed prior to installation. These coated rotors do not have such a protective film, but I am showing a cleaning for demonstrative purposes. If you choose to reinstall the JIS rotor mounting screw, be sure to apply anti-seize lubricant first. Mount the rotor lining up the mounting screw hole and reinstall the mounting screw. Set into place your lubricated caliper mounting bracket. Apply thread locker to the 2 17mm bolts and reinstall them into the mounting bracket. Use a torque wrench and apply 80 foot-pounds of torque to each. Apply lubricant to the mounts of the brake pads, making sure not to get any on the face of the brake pads. Insert both the outside and the inside brake pad. The inside brake pad has springs on top. Apply the smallest amount of synthetic lubricant on the springs of the inner brake pad. Carefully swing the brake caliper over the 2 pads. With a thin coating of silicone lubricant applied to the caliper guide pins, slide them into the boots and apply 18 foot-pounds to each when tightening with a torque wrench. Pop the brake caliper guide pin boot covers back into place. Reinstall the electronic parking brake connection, making sure that it is securely seated. Press the brake caliper spring clip into place. Return the tire to the vehicle. Return the lug nuts and hand tighten them. Raise the vehicle and remove the jack stands from both sides. Lower the vehicle. In a star pattern, torque the lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds. Start the vehicle and depress the brake pedal several times until the pedal becomes firm. Recalibrate the electronic parking brake by engaging the parking brake and releasing it at least twice. The first time it is engaged, it will take longer as the actuator travels to engage the brake. It is recommended to bed in your brakes to evenly distribute brake material over your new rotors and improve performance and wear over the life of your new brakes. On a road free of traffic, safely perform a handful of braking events from 40 miles per hour to about 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then, perform 5 to 10 aggressive stops from 60 miles per hour to 10 miles per hour to the point just before the ABS engages. Do not come to a complete stop. After 50 miles of travel, reevaluate the torque on your lug nuts, making sure they are still at 80 foot-pounds. That's it. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to receive notification of future content.